Here in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, Syrians arrive daily to escape the war. As the war in Syria enters its 4th year, 1/4 of Lebanon's population are refugees from Syria. Most are women and children. I remember meeting a pregnant Afghani woman in a completely abandoned camp in Pakistan. She couldn't travel when everyone else was relocated because she was too late in her pregnancy. She was alone with her 2 children and an older woman. There was nothing for miles around the camp, not a single tree, no other people in sight. So when they asked me to come in for tea, I said I didn't feel it was necessary. But being Afghans, they take pride in how they treat their guests, so they insisted, and they guided me into a small dirt house with no roof to keep out the scorching heat, and they dusted off these 2 old mats that they ate and slept and prayed on, and we sat and we talked, and they were just the loveliest women. And then with a few twigs and a single tin cup of water, they made the last of their tea, and they insisted that we enjoy it. I remember before we said goodbye to the pregnant lady, she pointed to her young boy. He had a dusty face and the brightest green eyes I've ever seen, but such a sad look, and she explained that he's always asking for more food, and it hurts her to say that they have nothing. And she asked if we would consider taking him. Would we take her son so he could eat? And she said it with tears in her eyes, such was her desperation. A desperation unimaginable to every parent in this room. A few weeks later, the war in Afghanistan began, and heavy fighting started right where they were. I've been back to that region 3 times, and I look for them every time.
As Eleanor Roosevelt once said, the destiny of human rights is in the hands of all our citizens and all our communities. And this evil will continue ruining the lives of millions of people unless we make this summit a turning point. And we can. We must send a message around the world that there is no disgrace in being a survivor of sexual violence, that the shame is on the aggressor. We must work together in new and unprecedented ways across borders and religions, bringing governments and people together and tackling the problem from every possible angle. And by doing this, we can end the use of rape and sexual violence as a weapon of war once and for all. We really can do it.
I remember in Tanzania, I met a child in a tent. He sat on the dusty floor. He'd been shot in the back and left paralyzed. And he crawled forward to shake my hand. He was no more than 15. He had big, pretty eyes and a big, wide, sparkling smile. And after all he'd been through, was full of laughter and love. Later that night, I asked why he'd not been taken to a hospital or at least given a wheelchair. And I was told that the boy's entire family had been killed, so there was no one to look after him. And he'd not been accepted for asylum in a 3rd country. And the aid workers had spent the money they could, but they didn't have any more. And I thought about him all night, and I wondered what I should do.
You said your mom had long hair. Tell me something else about your mom.
Sure.
I didn't get to meet your mom, so I want to know what she was like. Was she like you?
تشبه لها بس مو مثل خدودة وخشتها ووجهها وعيونها وإيه بس سنونها لا مش عاد سنونها.
1 year ago, Hala's mother was killed in an airstrike that hit their house. Hala and her 17-year-old brother Kamal were playing in the garden when it happened.
كنا بنلعب أنا وكامل بلعب ما رجعنا بالمرجوحة وهيك شغلات. لا حسينا نحن بعيد عن أمي كتير بعيد بالساحة وأمي بالطابق فوق. ما حسينا من وين البيت وقع على أمي. نحن كان راح يقول أن تضل على المرجوحة.
What Kamal witnessed changed him forever. The psychological trauma was so intense, he now suffers seizures. His personality regressed to that of a child.
I met an 8-year-old girl who had seen her family killed in front of her. And she'd grabbed her baby brother, and she ran into the jungle and survived, terrified and alone, for 2 weeks. She managed to find bananas and feed herself and her brother. And when I met her, she didn't talk. she just rocked back and forth, and I kept trying to tell her how brave we thought she was, and she just stared out the window. And a year later, I came back to that same camp, and I saw her again. She was still very shy, but she was beginning to speak, and she was sweet and polite, but she still didn't care about chatting with me or visitors. She just wanted to know how her brother was. He was with the doctors, and she was just checking to make sure everything was going to be okay. She was his mother now. That little girl had a depth and a strength that I will never know. The refugees I have met and spent time with have profoundly changed my life. The 8-year-old girl who saved her brother taught me what it is to be brave. The pregnant woman in Pakistan taught me what it is to be a mother. And the paralyzed boy who'd been shot in the back, with his big smile, showed me the strength of an unbreakable spirit. So today, on World Refugee Day, I thank them for letting me into their lives. And I thank you for coming.